Housing titles, land titles. Do you really own them? And moreover, can you actually prove it? When Australia was first settled, the Crown acquired land from the Indigenous people and disseminated that land under grants, under something called general law. This was where the Crown would grant you usury rights over something called a parcel of land. You could prove that you were the rightful owner of that land by simply referring to the deed or the grant from the Crown. If at any point you decided to trade that land and sell it to somebody else, you would then pass the original Crown grant to that person. If that person decided that they would want to trade with somebody else, they would pass the original Crown grant on, together with any other deeds from the original user or occupier. As the land was passed down and traded, deed after deed after deed was added to the folio, which would prove a link, of course, that led right back to the original Crown grant. This was known as the deeds system. That system worked very, very well, except that it was very cumbersome and there was a lot of work required to prove that documents were official, that going back to the original Crown grant, that all documents needed to be verified continually upon sale and transaction. As a result, the government of South Australia came up with a system called the Torrens system. And the Torrens system was created in 1858. After 20 or so years of Crown grants, it was decided that the government needed to take control over the deed system. Under the Torrens system, we saw the creation of something called the titles system. Under this system, the South Australian government required that people would hand in all of their deeds, their entire folio, which was often many, many, many pages, depending on how many owners there'd been. And these would be converted to something called title, a singular document that was a summary of the deed process, which gave a government guarantee that you were now the rightful owner of that parcel of land. This process was sold to the common man as a simplistic way to trade and transact land. No longer did you have to go through this messy deed process, proving ownership, proving who was the original occupier, right back to the Crown grants. Under this new Torrens system, it was easy. The government simply guaranteed that you were the rightful owner, and that was that. The only problem is that the deed process was lost forever once you converted to title. The deeds over time were archived and eventually destroyed. So you could no longer prove back to the dawn of time that you were the rightful owner of this property. All you had was a title that was a government guarantee. Over time, this Torrens legislation was adopted by Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. And in 1958, we saw the creation of the Land Transfer Act, known as the Land Transfer Act of 1958. This was really the moment at which all deeds upon transaction were deemed null and void and needed to be transferred to title so that everything could be controlled from a central location under something called the Registrar of Land. Little by little, the common man was having his land rights taken away through this idea of convenience and ease of use. And this has continued to be the case. So we moved from the old deed system under general law to land titles under the Torrens system. And now, as of 2000, the Registrar of Land created an electronic database to go one step further. In 2000, the process of converting land titles in Australia from paper to electronic had begun. In 2009, the legislation was modified again to start getting rid of all paper titles. As of August the 3rd, 2024 in Victoria, it will no longer be possible to hold a paper title of any kind. It will be a completely electronic system. Currently, 65% of all titles are electronic. So there's still work to be done, and there are still deeds, original deeds, still out there. Most likely because some of these properties are held in trust. The deeds are converted to title upon transaction. A transaction requires a financial institution, a lawyer, a conveyancer, all of the above. If there is no transaction, then it's highly possible that some of the original deeds are still intact. But if they do come up for transaction, they'll be transferred to title. And of course, as of August the 3rd, 2024, that title will be electronic/digital. Why is this important, Mr. Guy in the Hat? Why are you telling us this information? How does this affect me and my family, and should I care? The answer to that question is yes, because this is not the end of the road. Under the Australian Constitution, Section 51, subsection 31, what you need to understand is that right from the very, very beginning of Federation, there was a keenness by the Crown to acquire all land and move it into a central location. If you tie Section 51 together with the Land Transfer Act of 1958 and the Land Acquisition Act of 1989, what you will see is a definite move to remove all property rights from the common man and all ownership to be held at the decree and beck and call of a central government. What this means for you in the future is that once we move to a digital platform, the only way you are going to be able to see your housing title is if you log on to a database such as Land Data. And there are many other portals. If you have a look at compulsory acquisition, a government under compulsory acquisition can take a property if you cannot prove you're the rightful owner. If you think about history, the only thing that really gave you any ability to do that was the deed system under general law. But as I said, in South Australia in 1858, that was abolished. It became the case in 1862 for Victoria. Now, there are people that are listening to this right now who may or may not be aware that if you did a search for your paper title right now, you will see that it is void. There may be a very high probability that when you search for it online, it will say your paper title is void. Now, most people are going to have a heart attack when they see that, not understanding how or why this could potentially have happened. But in the field right next to where it says void, there will also be an ability for you to click on an electronic title, and you'll realize what's actually really happened is not that your land title is void per se, is that it has been converted through something called acquiescence. In other words, the fact that you didn't protest for it and you probably didn't even know about it, but it has been converted across to an electronic title. And the way this plays in the future is as follows. We have an act in Australia called the Properties and Securities Act of 2009. Again, tied into Land Transfer 1958, the Land Acquisition Act of 1989, Australian Constitution Compulsory Acquisition. There'll be something called proof of ownership. You'll be required at some point to log onto the portal and prove you own your property. In my opinion, this could be done by giving you a limited amount of time, 30 days. You have 30 days to log in, and all you have to do is prove you are the rightful owner. And it's a simple process. Your government will sell it to you as easy and simple. What you will do is log into Land Data. You will see your electronic title, and to claim ownership of it, all you need to do is put in your digital ID. That's all you need to do. If you don't have a digital ID, you'll be given the opportunity to create one. If you don't create one, the problem is you won't be able to prove ownership of your title. If you can't prove ownership of your title under the Lands Acquisition Act of 1989 in conjunction with the Australian Constitution Section 51, compulsory acquisition, you lose your property to the Crown. This is exactly where this goes. The other place this goes, of course, is to tokenisation, the tokenisation of all land and the tokenisation of all property for the purposes of trading on Wall Street. Your land titles in their electronic form will be traded as either securities, fragments of a title, or as a complete title itself known as a utility. This is your future. This is here, this is now. This is not conspiracy theory. I tell you all of this because all I really want for you is to diversify. I want you to understand that ownership and possession that doesn't have to be proved far outweighs that which does. This leads me straight to physical commodities. You don't need to prove ownership of physical gold and silver. That has never been a thing, and it's never likely to be. Holding physical commodities within your possession gives you incredible wealth over time. In fact, gold and silver are the monetary system, period. Whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not, it's irrelevant of your point of view. Beyond that, we have digital assets. The digital asset space is disruptive because central bankers don't like the fact that it gives you autonomy and freedom and wealth, despite the fact that the entire system is sold to you as a system that is here for your benefit and your convenience and your wealth and your prosperity. I think by now, let's stop pretending. I think we know it isn't. So please understand that if you are not diversified and you are heavily exposed, especially in assets that are controlled by a central register of land or a state government, and the only thing that gives you ownership is your government's say-so, and the only way you can continue that ownership is by complying with whatever it is your government decides that you will comply with, then that is highly problematic. Protect your family at all costs. This has got everything to do with the welfare of our future generations. This has everything to do with your children and your grandchildren. Protect everything you have, protect everything you own, and as always, make good choices.